So I'm Jake Holmes, VP of Marketing here at ModelOp. And again, welcome to the Good Decisions webinar. This month, we're going to talk about minimum viable governance, or MVG, taking that approach to complying with the EUAI Act. We're going to cover three main things here in today's webinar. Number one, we're just going to do a overview of market trends related to AI regulations. There's a lot happening. We want to give you an overview. Then we're going to dive into the EUAI Act, give you a recap of what it is, talk about its risks, obligations, and deadlines. And then most importantly, we're going to translate those requirements from that regulation and really from AI regulations writ large to three practical steps that we can all take now, which we call minimum viable governance, a minimum viable governance, or MVG, that will help you prepare for the regulations, safeguard your business, and help accelerate innovation. And before we dive in, I do want to indicate that neither Dave Trier, who's the VP of Product here at ModelOp, nor I are lawyers. So obviously, when dealing with any regulation, I know a lot of the folks on the call may be general counsels or chief legal officers or part of the compliance. Please make sure you're consulting your own counsel. We're providing obviously navigational direction here on the EUAI Act and how to translate that to capabilities with AI governance. So just want to make that disclaimer up front that this is guidance, but work with your counsel, obviously. All right. So talking about the larger trends, there's a lot of, well, not necessarily noise, but a lot of reporting going on during earnings calls. A large swath of the S&P 500 has cited AI in their earnings calls. Actually, Q2 of this year was the highest percentage of AI being mentioned on earnings calls to date. And furthermore, there's a large section of the Fortune 500 that are citing AI regulations as risks in their annual report. So AI regulations and the risks related to AI are becoming material components that are being mentioned in earnings calls. And so, like it or not, AI regulations are moving forward. I'm not saying you have to agree or disagree with the content of those bills, but they're not going away. And so, it becomes negligent to just ignore it. And I know nobody on this call is doing that. But the point is, we have to prepare for the regulations. And there's different ways you can do that. And hopefully we can show you an effective way with MVG. But just last year, there's lots more bills coming, and they're not going to slow down. So expect in the coming weeks, months, years to see more and more regulations related to AI. Oh, one thing I did want to call out, and I'm sure a lot of you folks already know about it, but the National Conference of State Legislatures, which is the link where I used to track a lot of the legislation that's coming out. It's a great resource to have. So if you haven't started on your browser already, definitely put it in there. It's a great place to keep abreast of what's happening in the legislative bodies around the U.S. But speaking more globally, as many of you know, the EUAI Act, Artificial Intelligence Act, entered into force in August 1st. We've been talking about the EUAI Act for a while. It was going through many phases of getting confirmed and signed into law. And it went into force, which means the timelines for various obligations are happening now. They're on the clock. So what do you need to do? What do you need to understand to prepare for that? So I'll just do a quick recap of the EUAI Act. And again, a lot of resources on the EUAI Act. I've linked them here for quick summaries of what's in there. And you can read the whole text. It's obviously about 500 pages. So it's a great read. But in a nutshell, there's kind of five big things. Number 5, the risk-based approach to AI being most important, which I've got a nice summary on the next slide of. But to start, the purpose is ultimately to create trustworthy AI that supports innovation. With any new legislation coming out, like a lot has to be understood about it. But the goal of this is to make sure AI is done ethically, to make sure that society is protected, individuals are protected, and that it's done trustworthy, so people maintain their faith in a tool that can have big benefits to companies and to individuals if it's done responsibly. The scope is broad. I mean, similar to GDPR, I'm sure many of you probably still have some PTSD from rolling out compliance with GDPR starting about 10 years ago, 7 years ago. I know I do. I was part of that when I was at another tech company. So this is going to impact a lot of companies globally. If you're doing business in Europe, you obviously have to pay attention to it. But it impacts the entire value chain with AI, from providers, importers, distributors, and deployers. So pretty much everybody needs to pay attention to it. The impacts are significant. There are significant transparency and conformity obligations that folks need to deal with. So there's a lot that needs to be understood about it. And the consequences are very real. There are real fines, and I'll talk about it at the end, but there are more regulators that are enforcing laws and regulations around AI that make this very, very significant in terms of consequences. And then let's talk about the risk-based approach to AI. This is kind of the big summary of the act. If I was going to take away one thing, like, what do I need to know? It's this risk-tiered system of classifying AI initiatives or system into 4 levels of risk. Unacceptable risk, which is systems that are going to be prohibited. High risk, that require extensive requirements or obligations around transparency and conformity with the obligations in the law. And then limited risk and minimal risk. You can read the act. I've linked to the text here. It's actually very searchable and easy to navigate. And you can see the different articles, Article 5, 6, and 50, which define these different types of risks. But the key things to know, obviously, unacceptable risk is prohibited. High risk has a lot of obligations that are going to start going into force February 26, August 26, and August 2027. There's different elements that are happening at each of those deadlines. Again, consult your counsel to understand what needs to be done when. But this should give you an overall map of, hey, there's a lot that needs to be understood, and these deadlines are coming up at the beginning of next year. All right. There's a lot in the act, but most of it addresses these high-risk AI systems, which is where requirements will probably be most relevant to the folks on this call. There's a lot that goes into it, starting with a risk management framework that starts across, or that goes across the entire AI lifecycle. AI governance or risk management doesn't start when you put a model or initiative into production. It starts when you first define that use case. So there's a lot to think about from as soon as that use case is identified to when it's put into production, maintained, and ultimately sunsetted that needs to be paid attention to. There's requirements around documentation, conformity, transparency, reporting, adherence. There's a lot to tackle. But again, like, you can read in the act. I'm not a lawyer. I think please go into the act and talk to your counsel about those individual requirements. But what I can say is that all those requirements from the EU AI Act and other AI regulations really kind of fall into these 5 buckets of basically being able to inventory, know what's being used within your organization with AI, having the controls around those AI, testing and validation, ongoing reviews, and risk tiering and management. And so with those 5 capabilities in mind, what is the right level of governance to achieve those, to make sure that you're able to comply with these regulatory requirements? And this is where Dave Trier, our VP of Product, is going to come in and talk about minimum viable governance. Take it away, Dave.
Thank you so much. And thanks again for everyone joining. Good morning, good evening. Dave Trier, VP of Product. I've had the pleasure of working with some of the largest organizations in the world, especially around AI governance and model governance over the past 6+ years. And there's really routinely what we're seeing is that there's a lot of investment, as Jay mentioned, in AI and previously ML. And most of them I know I need to do AI governance. I know I need to do it, but how do I get started? It seems so daunting. And that's just where, but based on my history as a head of product and working routinely on MVP, minimum viable product, came up this concept of minimal viable governance. Think of it as the Goldilocks of governance. Not too much, not too little, but just enough to get started in protecting the organization, but not slowing down those innovation cycles around AI. Now, what that entails is really three core facets. First is establishing a governance inventory to make sure you have visibility into everywhere AI is being used and the appropriate management, risk management, understanding of the various assets, et cetera, as it relates to all those AI systems. Second is applying a lightweight set of controls. You don't need to go overboard when you get started, but a lightweight set of controls to make sure you have the right verification, the right evidence, the right approvals to meet your governance policy, but again, not slowing down innovation. And then third is to be able to pull out streamlined reporting so that you have enterprise level transparency and understanding where and how AI is being used. In the next couple of slides, we're going to go through a couple of examples of what is required of the EU AI Act, what are some of the challenges that organizations face as it relates to that regulation, as well as AI governance as a whole, and then how we can apply this MVG concept to address not only the regulatory, but also best practices as it relates to doing AI governance. So with that, we'll go into the first one, Jay, where we're talking about that governance inventory. On the left-hand side, you can see some extracts from the EU AI Act, which talk about, as Jay mentioned, it first starts with making sure that you have an understanding of everywhere AI is being used and are doing a risk tiering around it. The EU AI Act, as Jay mentioned, is around unacceptable use, high risk, low risk, or minimal risk. So you need to first start by understanding what AI systems are out there and doing that risk tiering. But as you see on that second item on the left-hand side, the Act goes a little bit further in Article 71 as it relates to high-risk systems and making sure that you have a full registration around those and actually pushing that up into the EU database so that you're registering, whether you're a developer or using it, i.e. a deployer of this high-risk system, that you're actually registering with a central EU database. So you can't really just get away with, oh, we've got a spreadsheet of here's all the different AI systems. You actually need to have the appropriate management of those, and you'll need to be able to account for and register those. But then if you look at the bottom left, it goes a step further. If you look at Clause 5F of Article 10, it's not only just, I know about here's the AI systems, but you need to have proper accountability, evidence, asset, data management as it relates to all of those different systems. So this is where what you see on the right-hand side, a lot of organizations are challenged because they're using manual approaches. They're using spreadsheets, if you will, to track here's all the different AI systems out there, regardless of they're internally developed or it's a software system with their purchased AI, if you will. So they're using this manual approach to track the various systems. That's a good start. But again, if you talk about and look at the left-hand side, it's not just I know about it, but I need to do that risk tiering. And I need to also have that proper evidence and asset management. And a lot of times we hear it's like, yeah, we got good enough. We'll figure out the rest later. Well, that leads to those challenges you see in the bottom right, which is you have inconsistent and manual tracking. That leads to a lot of outdated information, or you just don't even know where AI is being used. It leads to that lacking of that appropriate assets and evidence management. And also, it's very difficult to keep pace because these regulations are constantly evolving. There's new regulations coming out. Your internal policy is constantly evolving. So you'll need more resources to try to keep this manual spreadsheet up to date. And it only gets worse, as you can imagine, because there's such a variety of different technologies being used, whether open source, cloud-based, whether you're purchasing it as a third party, or whether it's software that now has AI embedded. So it's very difficult to keep pace with that. If you go to the next one, how we can address that with MVG. That MVG first starts with establishing, even today, even early on, when you only have a few AI use cases, a dynamic and real-time inventory so that you can constantly have visibility into all those different technologies that are being used that have AI as part of it, but you're also having very detailed tracking of the accountability, the various assets that are being used, the various data traceability, et cetera. So that can be dynamically updated. You're not manually reaching out to all these different parties. It's dynamically updated. So first establishing that inventory. And then the second thing we always do with our customers is that you probably do have some spreadsheet with all your AI systems. Fantastic. let's get those on board. Let's do a bulk import of all those AI systems into, let's say, a ModelOp center. So you have that dynamic inventory. It has all your existing AI systems out there, and you're starting to track those appropriately. But then the third area there is make it easy. Make it easy for your different business and model owners to onboard into a ModelOp Center AI governance capability by using integrations, by being able to pull in the various source code, references to data, references to assets, to be able to pull those seamlessly in, regardless of whether you're using a cloud-based tool like an AWS SageMaker or maybe an MLflow, but making it easy to quickly collect all of the information, data, assets, and evidence, if you will. So again, it starts with that dynamic inventory, just making sure you have a systematic way to capture all the various AI systems, regardless of it's in-house, purchased, or software that has AI embedded. If you go to the next one, we move into, all right, great, I've established that inventory. Now I need to establish a light set of controls. On the left-hand side, again, a couple of extracts from the EU AI Act. One example of a control, if you will, is being able to ensure that you are enforcing the fundamental rights impact assessment for any high-risk AI system, part of Article 27, right? So this is where it's not only just, I know about it, but based on the tiering, whether it's high risk or low or minimal risk, I need to do a set of actions. One of those could be, as a high-risk system, doing that fundamental rights impact assessment, making sure it's done across all the different teams, across all the different AI use cases, and making sure that you have, again, the appropriate evidence collected that can say, yes, I did that fundamental rights impact assessment as part of it. But further, it's not only just did I, check off the box on a given review or assessment. In Article 9, the EU AI Act talks about, it's also about proactively managing the risks related to that AI system, to make sure that you're understanding the specific model risks, not just the kind of corporate risks, if you will, but specific model risks, as models are a very unique piece of software that's very tied to data, that's probabilistic, et cetera. But you're proactively managing the risks around those. What we typically see in most organizations before we come in is that there's, a blanket policy. We're not going to use ChatGPT altogether, so you're prohibiting it, right? Or we see things such as, there's a manual approach, very manual mapping of the different risks to controls, or there's just a blanket, we're going to just do a review for every single AI system, regardless of if it's a high risk or a low risk. And as you can imagine, that presents a lot of challenges. This one-size-fits-all approach to compliance, it really can cause unnecessary delays. Second, the manual approach can slow down innovation quite substantially, to the point where it may take double, triple the amount of time as it should take to get new AI concepts out the door. And again, a lot of customers say, I've only got one or two use cases right now related to AI, but I know at the corporate level, as Jay talked about, they're trying to scale to 10, 100, 1,000 different AI use cases. And if you continue on this current approach with the manual steps, the manual enforcement, if you will, you're going to need substantial headcount. And lastly, what I see is a lot of customers say is like, again, I don't have a lot of AI systems out there, right? So I think I'm just going to continue on. Well, what we routinely see is that it really is still a bit of the Wild West of AI if that status quo continues. And you're going to continue to create what we call AI governance debt, which is that eventually these policies, internal, external, will catch up to you. And you're going to have to go back and correct all of the missing pieces, all of the artifacts, the evidence, the lack of reporting and auditability. And that's going to be a substantial effort. It's going to be costly, and it's going to require a lot of your resources. So for us, we say, let's avoid that AI governance debt. Let's get the right foundation in place even early on in your overall cycle. So let's take a look at the MVG approach for controls. It's not about just providing a very overbearing, a lot of different steps in the process. It's, again, the Goldilocks, the right amount of controls, a lightweight set of controls. And that starts with that automated and consistent risk tiering, right? This is where you can ensure that you're following, if it's the EU AI Act, if it's unacceptable, high risk, low or minimal. If it's within, say, the US and the state level, you may do high, medium, or low, or you may have a policies tier 1, 2, 3, 4. Regardless, making sure that you are consistently applying risk tiering based on the inputs that you know about it overall. Then second is using automation, using a lightweight set of workflows to make sure that you are enforcing the steps in your governance policy. These can be things as simple as making sure, again, based on the risk tiering, if you need certain reviews, or based on the type of data that you might be using, you may need additional steps, things such as fitness of purpose, ethical fairness reviews, etc. But making sure that you're doing the mapping of the controls to your policy and then using automation to enforce those consistently. So again, we step back, we first establish that inventory to know where all the AI systems are. We apply a lightweight set of controls using automation. And then as we go to the third area around reporting, coming back to, even before we get into the excerpts there, on the top left is actually a quote from Julie Sweet, the CEO of Accenture, where and just all of the work that she's been doing, she's recognized that, yes, there's a lot of investment around AI, but CEOs really don't have any visibility into where they're being used. That less than 2% can identify where and how AI is being used. Regardless of regulations, that's a problem because you're investing tens of millions of dollars into AI. You want to know where it's being used. What's the return on investment? What's the value it's driving to the organization? But if you look in the bottom left in Annex 8 of the EU AI Act, that there actually are some specific requirements for deployers of high-risk AI systems. Deployers are those organizations that are using AI systems, if you will. And that includes making sure you have the proper record keeping up front, but also that you are ongoing, making sure that you're taking a look at how those AI systems are being used, any updates thereof, any performance, etc. Now, if you think about on the right-hand side, what we routinely see with customers is that it's a manual approach. I think you've seen the common theme here. It's a manual approach. Each team is actually doing it a little bit different on how they're tracking the performance and usage and ongoing risks and also value around it. There's oftentimes separate processes for vendor models. They might be using a vendor management system versus internal models where they might be trying to dovetail and use existing more technical based tools. And a lot of times, again, there's we're not doing any audit today. We'll figure it out later. As you can imagine, with that inconsistent approach, really leads to difficulty in providing that enterprise level visibility around the usage of AI. It leads to inconsistent ways to track metrics and testing and reporting, if you will, which makes it difficult to showcase to different regulatory authorities that, number one, we have a process, and number two, that we're doing that on a consistent basis. And then the last one is around accountability. As I mentioned with that quote from Julie Sweet, is how can we make sure that we surface up to executives that are signing big checks around using AI? How can we make sure that we are reporting back on the value they're driving, that they can rationalize the investment in AI overall? If you turn to the MBG approach, how do we apply MBG to this area? It first starts with making sure you do have a set of consistent ways, metrics, if you will, to track that AI is being used as expected, that it's performance, that the ethical fairness is in line, and other both custom metrics as well as the out-of-the-box metrics like a tool like ModelOp provides, are providing that consistent way to understand the usage and the risk around it. Second, you have a consistent way to report on the overall AI systems that are being used, whether it's model cards, whether it's very detailed PDF type reports, but making sure that you are automatically creating those, populating them, and potentially sending them out to regulatory authorities like the Central EU database. And then finally, being able to provide executives real-time enterprise level insight into not only what the value that they're driving, but also what are the risks. This is where ModelOp has concepts like AI governance scores that just give really an apples to apples comparison of how compliant each model is with the overall governance policy, regardless of it's a LLM or an NLP or traditional regression overall. So again, as we walk through this, you can think about this is a stair step, right? Where you establish the inventory, you apply that lightweight set of controls, and by using tools such as ModelOp, you're naturally being able to supply that inventory, the controls, and then automatically are given that reporting that you would expect, both at the model level as well as up at the executive level for these insights that we talked about. So with that, I'll hand it back to Jay to talk through how we then take that to typical enterprises and we'll take it from there. Jay?
Come off mute here. Perfect. Thanks, Dave. That was great. And love the dialogue in the chat here. A lot of great points and questions. But just getting back to kind of the conclusion here, we talked about the market trends around AI regulations, recap of the EU AI Act, and Dave talked about the MVG approach, this automated and integrated way focused on an inventory, light controls, and streamlined reporting. So the big question comes down to like, well, why can't I stay with the status quo? Well, the high cost of non-compliance and ineffective systems is very, very significant. Obviously, the EU AI Act has penalties for non-compliance, and as the different articles come into effect over the coming months and years, these will be critical to monitor. But beyond just the kind of the sticks that exist within the AI regulations, there's scrutiny increasing on decision-making models in general, AI, whether they're AI, ML based. But I'll use the example, of TD Bank. They were recently in a settlement with a couple of different organizations within the U.S. for having failed anti-money laundering systems that didn't effectively work. And you can see that $3 billion penalty really is a record. So decision-making models present a huge amount of risk and can have significant impacts on the business. So the cost of non-compliance or having ineffective systems is extremely, extremely high. And so I think we all agree that AI governance is table stakes at this point. There are a lot of folks that are doing it maybe manually or with an in-house approach, or using maybe an existing system to kind of repurpose it for AI governance. But the reality is, for all the reasons that Dave talked to, the scaling challenges, the integration challenges, the automation challenges, sticking with the status quo, you can, and maybe that works for a single use case or a few use cases, but as you cross each individual river and try to rebuild the system or adapt, a third-party vendor model to a system that's made for in-house models, it's going to be challenging and take a lot of resources and become expensive to do. So this minimum viable governance approach is to basically go with the landscape, work with what the requirements of AI models, the distinct and unique requirements that models necessitate, and have the right controls with automation in place to make it a much smoother ride and ultimately accelerate innovation. And that's really the goal of effective governance, is not to be a brake. It's not to be the office of no. It's to help work with the business and create competitive advantage. And so with that, I know, obviously we can only cover so much in 30 minutes, but we'd love to hear more from you. So please reach out to either, request a meeting with our team or get a demo of minimum viable governance. We'd love to show you more and how it can apply to your business. So please reach out. And Dave, I know we're at the 30, but there's just a great question here in the chat on who owns AI. I think that we've got a couple of different questions. Sometimes AI rolls up into the CDO, or maybe there's a center of excellence. What trends are you seeing with accountability and ownership of AI within enterprises?
Yeah, it's a great question. And right now, there's not one answer. In some places that we've seen actually a chief AI officer, which is obviously accountable for everything related to AI. In other organizations, it rolls up to the CDO or CDAO, if you will. And sometimes we've even seen where AI rolls up into the chief transformation or chief digital transformation officer. So unfortunately, we've seen a variety of different answers depending on the organization. But ultimately, where AI governance rolls up to is the person that is accountable for all of the outcomes of AI, regardless of that's, again, a CAIO, a CDAO. It doesn't matter. It's that person that is accountable for the usage of AI.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everybody, for attending and staying a little after to talk through some of these questions. Yes, we will be sending out the deck and the recording after this. We'll get it posted for you. And please reach out. We'd love to talk to you more about your AI and AI governance needs. So please be in touch. And yes, again, we will share the deck. Absolutely. Can't wait. And we will be doing another webinar next month. We're still setting the date for November because obviously there's the holidays, and we'll get that announcement out to you shortly. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.